The moment I found the note, I froze. It was tucked neatly beneath the velvet lining of my sapphire necklace box, a family heirloom I had just worn to the most opulent dinner my family had hosted in years. The handwriting was clean, urgent, and shaking slightly at the edges. Leave this house before it's too late. Samuel. Samuel. Our butler for over 15 years. A man of few words. Absolute. Loyalty and unwavering precision. For him to slip me a note in secret, during an event where every smile had been rehearsed, every glass of champagne perfectly poured, every glance from my husband's sister just a little too sharp, I knew something wasn't right. I sat at my vanity, fingers trembling as I traced the words. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, its deep chimes, echoing through the mansion's west wing. Everyone else had retired for the night after the spectacular dinner celebrating the new Ashford-Beaumont family trust. Everyone except me. My reflection stared back. Evelyn Ashford-Beaumont, 42, the perfect society wife in her Chanel dress, now rumpled from an evening of performative smiling. I looked put together on the outside. Always had. But inside, I was crumbling. Mrs. Beaumont? I jumped, nearly dropping the note. Samuel stood in the doorway of my dressing room, his posture impeccable as always. But his eyes, they darted nervously to my hands, then to the hallway behind him. I apologize for startling you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. May I come in? I nodded, quickly folding the note and slipping it into my robe pocket. Samuel closed the door silently behind him. The guests have all departed, madam. Mr. Beaumont is in his study with Miss Fiona. They've requested not to be disturbed. The way he emphasized those last words made my skin prickle with unease. Samuel, I began cautiously, is there something I should know? His face remained stoic, but I'd known him long enough to see the battle waging behind his eyes. Finally, he spoke. I've worked for the Beaumont family for nearly 2 decades, Mrs. Beaumont. I've served with discretion and loyalty. But there are boundaries to loyalty when it concerns matters of conscience. He hesitated, glancing at the door again. Your medication, madam. Have you been feeling unlike yourself lately? The question caught me off guard. For months, I'd been experiencing strange episodes of confusion, fatigue, moments where I couldn't remember conversations that others claimed we'd had. How did you know? I whispered. Because I've seen Ms. Fiona entering your bathroom when you're not present. And Mr. Nathan. He's been consulting with Dr. Winters about what he calls your condition. Dr. Winters. My husband's friend, not my doctor. A psychiatrist. I'd never consulted. What condition? I demanded, my voice stronger now, anger cutting through confusion. They're documenting episodes, madam. Creating a record of instability. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. For what purpose? But even as I asked, pieces began falling into place. The sidelong glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the gentle suggestions that I rest instead of attending family business meetings. The trust, Mrs. Beaumont, the one they celebrated tonight, the one that consolidates all Ashford-Beaumont assets under Mr. Nathan's sole discretion. My late father-in-law's will had left me as co-trustee of the family fortune. My signature was required for major financial decisions, a protection he'd put in place knowing his son's impulsive nature, a protection that had clearly become inconvenient. They're trying to declare me incompetent, I whispered, the horror of it washing over me. Samuel nodded once, his eyes filled with a sadness that confirmed my worst fears. I've overheard discussions about a private facility in Switzerland, for rest and recovery. His voice hardened slightly. People sometimes don't return from such places, madam. I thought about the dinner just hours before. Nathaniel raising his glass, his charismatic smile reaching everyone but me. To family legacy and proper stewardship, the approving nods. Fiona's manicured hand on my shoulder, squeezing just a little too hard as she added, and to Evelyn, who always puts family first. I'd been blind. So blind. Why are you telling me this, Samuel? You're risking everything. His posture straightened even more, if that was possible. Your father-in-law was a good man, Mrs. Beaumont. He valued integrity above all things. Before he passed, he made me promise to look after his legacy. I believe you are that legacy, not the money. Tears sprang to my eyes. The old man had always treated me like a daughter, not just an addition to the family portfolio. What should I do? I asked, hating how weak my voice sounded. First, stop taking the medication. Second, secure copies of important documents. And third, he paused, trust no one in this house except me. A soft knock at the far door made us both freeze. Samuel immediately resumed his professional demeanor. Will that be all, Mrs. Beaumont? He asked, his voice now at normal volume. Yes, thank you, Samuel, I replied, matching his tone. The door opened, and Nathaniel appeared, still in his tuxedo pants and shirt, bow tie undone. My husband of 12 years looked handsome as ever, his dark hair perfectly styled despite the late hour, his smile warm. I wondered how I had never noticed before how that warmth never reached his eyes. Darling, why are you still up? You should be resting. His concern sounded genuine. Had it always been this convincing? Just removing my jewelry, I said, forcing a smile. It was such a wonderful evening. It was, wasn't it? He stepped into the room, nodding dismissively at Samuel, who bowed slightly and exited. Everyone was impressed, especially with how you held yourself together. The phrasing sent a chill down my spine. What do you mean? I asked, carefully removing my earrings. He approached, placing his hands on my shoulders, meeting my eyes in the vanity mirror. You've been under so much stress lately. Those episodes. But tonight, no one would have guessed. His fingers massaged my shoulders, but all I felt was dread. I'm feeling much better, I lied. Perhaps I could join you at the foundation. Meeting tomorrow? His hands stilled for just a moment, a tell I might have missed before tonight. Oh, darling, there's no need. It's just boring financial talk. Besides, he leaned down to kiss my cheek, his cologne suffocating me. Dr. Winters suggested you minimize stressful situations. We're all just concerned about you. As he straightened and our eyes met in the mirror again, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Calculation. Cold, precise calculation. Of course, I murmured. You're right. I always am, he replied with a chuckle that once would have charmed me. That's why you married me. He kissed the top of my head and moved toward the door. Don't stay up too late. You need your rest. When the door closed behind him, I sat motionless, feeling the weight of the note in my pocket. The woman in the mirror looked terrified, but beneath that terror, I saw something else beginning to spark. Determination. I carefully removed the rest of my jewelry, placing each piece in its rightful spot in my vanity. Then I pulled out the note again, reading it one more time before walking to the fireplace and watching it burn to ash. The game had begun, and they had no idea I was now playing. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the French windows of my bedroom. For a blissful moment, I existed in the space between sleep and wakefulness, where everything was as it had been for years. Beautiful, predictable, safe. Then reality crashed back. The note. Samuel's warnings. My husband's cold calculation. I sat up slowly, my eyes immediately going to the ornate pill box on my nightstand. The same pills I'd faithfully taken every morning for the past 6 months. Prescribed by Dr. Winters for what Nathaniel had called my anxiety and occasional disorientation. With trembling hands, I opened the box and tipped the small white tablet into my palm. What had they been giving me? I slipped the pill into a tissue and tucked it into the pocket of my robe. The mansion was already alive with activity downstairs. Wednesday meant the weekly foundation meeting, the one I'd been too fragile to attend for months now. I'd given up my career as an art curator when I married Nathaniel, throwing myself instead into the charitable work of the Ashford Beaumont Foundation. Until recently, I'd been instrumental in its direction. I dressed carefully, a conservative St. John, knit suit in navy, pearl earrings, light makeup, professional, composed, the opposite of unstable. As I descended the grand staircase, I heard voices from the main dining room, Nathaniel and Fiona, heads bent close together over coffee and papers. Good morning, I called out, injecting brightness into my voice. Their heads snapped up in perfect synchronicity, twin expressions of surprise quickly, masked by smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Evelyn, you're up early, Nathaniel said, standing. His 6'3" frame towered over his sister's petite figure. They shared the same aristocratic features, high cheekbones, aquiline noses, piercing blue eyes, but where his held charm, hers held only calculation. I'm feeling remarkably clear-headed today, I replied, pouring myself coffee from the silver service on the sideboard. I thought I might join the foundation meeting. A glance passed between them, quick but unmistakable. Darling, we discussed this, Nathaniel began, his tone gentle but firm. Dr. Winters was very clear about— Actually, I interrupted, surprised by my own boldness, I'd like to speak with Dr. Winters myself. It seems strange that my husband knows more about— my diagnosis than I do. Fiona's coffee cup clinked sharply against its saucer. Evelyn, we're only looking out for your best interests. This insistence on pushing yourself is exactly the kind of behavior that concerns us. Us? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. I wasn't aware my sister-in-law had medical authority over me. Fiona's face flushed. At 45, 3 years my senior, she'd never married, devoting herself instead to the family business and to controlling her brother's life. What Fiona means, Nathaniel interjected smoothly, coming to stand beside me, one hand at the small of my back in a gesture that once felt protective but now felt possessive, is that we all care about you. The foundation will be fine without you for a while longer. And the new trust? I asked, innocently. The one we celebrated last night? I assume there are documents I need to sign as co-trustee? Another glance between them, longer this time. Actually, Nathaniel said, given your condition, the lawyers felt it best to proceed with a temporary transfer of trustee powers. Just until you're better, of course. The room seemed to tilt slightly, so it was already in motion. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the roaring in my ears. And when was this decided? Evelyn, Fiona cut in, her voice honey-sweet with condescension. You were there for the discussions. Don't you remember? This is exactly the kind of thing that worries us. These memory lapses. Memory lapses they'd manufactured with whatever was in those pills. Perhaps you're right, I conceded, hating the relief that visibly washed over them. Maybe I should rest today. That's my sensible girl, Nathaniel said, kissing my forehead. Samuel can bring lunch to your room, and I'll tell you all about the meeting later. I nodded, playing the role of the dutiful, fragile wife as I excused myself and retreated upstairs. But instead of returning to my bedroom, I made a detour to Nathaniel's study. The heavy oak door was locked, as expected. But being the perfect wife had its advantages, including knowing where the spare key was hidden. I slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind me. Nathaniel's study was a testament to old money and masculine power. Leather-bound books, a massive desk, hunting trophies from African safaris I'd always despised. I went straight to the filing cabinet behind. His desk, the one he thought I didn't know the combination to. 3 quick turns of the dial, and I was in. The Ashford Beaumont Trust documentation was right where I expected, in a crisp manila folder labeled with yesterday's date. As I flipped through the pages, my blood ran cold. There it was in black and white, a petition for temporary conservatorship, citing my declining mental health and inability to make sound financial decisions. Attached were incident reports, documenting outbursts I never had, confused episodes that never occurred, and signature pages with my name forged so convincingly it made me dizzy. And at the bottom, Dr. Winter's professional assessment recommending immediate intervention for the patient's own safety and well-being. They weren't just trying to control the money. They were trying to control me, to erase me. I quickly photographed every page with my phone, then returned everything exactly as I'd found it. As I locked the cabinet, I noticed a small black notebook in Nathaniel's desk drawer, his daily planner. I flipped it open to today's date. 10 Yabber a.m., foundation meeting. 2 hour p.m., call with Dr. Winters, ease transfer, 4:30 p.m., Swiss. Clinic arrangements finalized. My hands shook so badly I could barely replace the planner. They were moving fast, faster than I'd imagined. I had days, not weeks. I slipped out of the study and hurried to my room, my mind racing. I needed help, but who could I trust? My family lived on the West Coast. My friends were all Nathaniel's friends, really, part of the same social circle. My former colleagues from the art world? We'd lost touch years ago when I'd embraced my role as Mrs. Beaumont. I'd never felt so alone. A soft knock at my door made me jump. Mrs. Beaumont? Samuel's voice came through the door. I've brought your morning tea. I opened the door, checking the hallway was empty before ushering him in. Samuel, I whispered. They're moving quickly. There are documents forged, and they're making arrangements for me to be sent away. Today. To his credit, Samuel's expression remained impassive, but his eyes betrayed his alarm. Then we must move more quickly, madam, he said, setting down the tea tray. Do you still have the key to your father-in-law's private safe? The one in the library? I nodded. Old Mr. Beaumont had given it to me shortly before his, death, with explicit instructions not to tell Nathaniel. My son is brilliant with money, my dear, but sometimes lacking in conscience, he'd said. This is for emergencies only. If this wasn't an emergency, nothing was. There may be something there that can help you, Samuel said. Something Mr. Beaumont Sr. prepared, just in case. In case of what? Samuel's eyes met mine directly. In case his son ever became like his mother. I inhaled sharply. Nathaniel's mother, a woman I'd never met, had been institutionalized when he was young. Family lore painted her as tragically unstable. But what if you think history is repeating itself? I whispered, but with me as the victim this time. Samuel nodded once. Mr. Beaumont Sr. feared as much. He saw patterns emerging. A chill ran through me. How had I never seen it? The control, the isolation, the careful crafting of a narrative where I was increasingly unstable, increasingly dependent. I need to get to that safe, I said. Tonight, Samuel advised. After dinner. They'll be distracted with the foundation paperwork. I'll create a diversion if necessary. I nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of my situation. My voice broke as I asked, "Why, Samuel? We've been married 12 years. Why now?" Samuel's formal demeanor softened slightly. "The terms of the original trust, madam. Your voting power becomes absolute on your 15th wedding anniversary. 3 years from now, you would control everything." Of course. It had always been about money, about power. Dinner that evening was an exercise in theatrical performance. I wore a silk Valentino dress in emerald green, Nathaniel's favorite color, on me. My hair was perfectly styled, my makeup flawless. The picture of a devoted, stable wife. "You look lovely tonight," Nathaniel remarked as I entered the dining room, his eyes assessing rather than admiring. "Thank you, darling. I thought the effort might lift my spirits." I smiled, taking my seat at the opposite end of the mahogany table that stretched between us like a chasm. Fiona sat at Nathaniel's right hand, as always. "How nice to see you, present Evelyn," she said, emphasis revealing the double meaning. "I've been reflecting on what you both said this morning," I replied, allowing vulnerability to color my tone. "Perhaps I have been confused lately. It's frightening not to trust your own mind." The look that passed between them contained unmistakable triumph. "That's a positive step, acknowledging the problem," Nathaniel said, signaling to Samuel to serve the wine. "Dr. Winters will be pleased to hear it." "When will I see him next?" I asked innocently. "Soon," Fiona interjected before Nathaniel could answer. "Very soon." The Swiss clinic, I thought. They weren't even planning to let me speak with him before shipping me off. Throughout dinner, I played my part. Attentive, slightly hesitant, occasionally trailing off mid-sentence as if losing my train of thought. Each episode was noted with concerned glances, reinforcing the narrative they'd crafted. When dessert was served, I mentioned feeling fatigued. "Would you mind terribly if I retired early? I haven't been sleeping well." Nathaniel nodded indulgently. "Of course, darling. I'll check on you later." "No need," I said quickly, then softened my tone. "I'll probably take one of those sleeping pills Dr. Winters prescribed. They knock me out completely." Another exchange of glances. Relief. I was making it easy for them. I kissed Nathaniel's cheek, nodded politely to Fiona, and left the dining room. Instead of heading upstairs, however, I slipped into the darkened library, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain they could hear it from the dining room. The Beaumont Library was magnificent. 2 stories of leather-bound first editions, historical maps, and family archives. During my first years of marriage, I'd spent countless hours here, researching the family's art collection and philanthropic history. Old Mr. Beaumont's private safe was concealed behind a portrait of his late wife, Nathaniel's mother, a beautiful, sad-eyed woman who'd supposedly died in a Swiss mental institution when Nathaniel was 10. I'd always found it strange that her portrait hung in the library, rather than the main hall with other family portraits. Now I wondered if it had been deliberately positioned to guard the safe. I carefully removed the portrait, revealing the small wall safe behind it. With trembling fingers, I entered the combination, my wedding date, which the old man had chosen with a wink, saying, "The best day in the Beaumont family's recent history, my dear." The safe door swung open silently. Inside was a single manila envelope, yellowed with age, with my name written on it in old Mr. Beaumont's shaky handwriting. I removed it and closed the safe, replacing the portrait carefully before retreating to a window alcove partially hidden by heavy velvet drapes. Heart racing, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, dated 3 months before the old man's death, and a USB drive. "My dear Evelyn, if you are reading this, then you have found reason to doubt my son's intentions toward you. I pray I am wrong, But I have seen patterns in Nathaniel that disturb me greatly, patterns that echo his mother's family more than my own. What the world believes about Elizabeth's illness is largely fabrication. My wife was not mentally unstable. She was inconvenient. She discovered financial improprieties in my business dealings I am deeply ashamed of now, and threatened to expose them. Rather than face my wrongdoing, I conspired with her brother, who had his own reasons for wanting control of her inheritance, to have her declared incompetent. The Swiss clinic was real. Elizabeth never left it alive. This sin has haunted me for 40 years. I've watched with growing horror as Nathaniel, guided by his aunt and uncle on his mother's side, has developed the same ruthless approach to obstacles, including, I fear, you. The Ashford-Beaumont Foundation structure, which gives you equal control, was my attempt to prevent history from repeating itself. On the enclosed drive is evidence of everything: my crimes against Elizabeth, and documentation of a similar plan I discovered in Nathaniel's files 6 months ago, with your name where Elizabeth's once was. I'm an old man paying for his sins, Evelyn. I cannot change the past, but perhaps I can prevent its repetition. Use this information wisely. When you're safe, expose it all. Let the truth finally be known. With deepest remorse and affection, Edward Beaumont. I sat frozen, the letter clutched in my hands, as the full horror washed over me. This wasn't just about money or control. If old Mr. Beaumont was right, my life was in genuine danger. The sound of voices in the hallway jolted me back to awareness. I quickly tucked the letter and USB drive into my dress pocket and slipped out of the library through the side door that led to the garden terrace. The night air was cool against my flushed skin as I hurried along the path that led to the guest cottage, a small, charming structure at the edge of the property where Samuel lived. I needed somewhere safe to view the contents of the USB drive, somewhere beyond Nathaniel's surveillance. I knocked softly on Samuel's door, praying he was there and not still serving in the main house. The door opened almost immediately. Samuel's usually impassive face showed momentary surprise before he stepped aside to let me in. Mrs. Beaumont, is everything all right? No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I pulled out the letter and USB drive. I need your help, Samuel, and I need somewhere safe to view this. Samuel read the letter quickly, his expression growing grimmer with each line. When he finished, he looked at me with genuine fear in his eyes. This changes everything, madam. We must get you away from here immediately. I need to see what's on this drive first, I insisted. I need to understand exactly what I'm facing. Samuel nodded reluctantly and led me to a small desk where an aged laptop sat. It's not much, but it should work for this purpose. I plugged in the drive with shaking hands. It contained a single folder labeled with my initials, EAB. Inside were dozens of files, scanned documents detailing Elizabeth Beaumont's treatment, financial records showing how her fortune had been siphoned away, and most chillingly, a nearly identical plan with my name, dated from 3 years ago, just as old Mr. Beaumont had written. There were also audio recordings. I clicked on one labeled NB and FA Strategy Discussion. Nathaniel's voice filled the small room. The Swiss clinic has an excellent reputation for discretion. Once she's there, we can begin the legal process of permanent guardianship. Fiona's voice responded. And if she refuses to go voluntarily, that's what the medication is for. Nathaniel replied calmly. Dr. Winters has assured me it's virtually undetectable and creates symptoms remarkably similar to early onset dementia. A few more months and even Evelyn will believe. She's losing her mind. I stopped the recording, bile rising in my throat. They've been drugging me, I whispered, for months, making me think I was going crazy. Samuel's face was ashen. Mrs. Beaumont, you cannot return to the main house tonight. If they suspect you know anything, I have to, I interrupted. If I disappear now, they'll know something's wrong. I need time to make copies of all this evidence and get it somewhere safe. I need time to plan. At least take this, Samuel said, opening a drawer and removing a small silver key. It's to the gardener's cottage at the far end of the property. It hasn't been used in years. If you need to escape quickly, go there. I've kept it stocked with emergency supplies. I took the key, grateful for his foresight. Thank you, Samuel, for everything. I failed Mrs. Elizabeth, he said quietly. I won't fail you too. I copied the contents of the USB drive onto Samuel's laptop, then carefully made my way back to the main house. The dining room was empty, but I could hear Nathaniel and Fiona in his study, their voices animated as they discussed what sounded like financial projections. I slipped upstairs unnoticed and prepared, For bed as usual, my mind racing with everything I'd learned. Sleep seemed impossible, but I needed to appear rested in the morning, needed to maintain the charade that nothing had changed. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. The fear was still there, but now it was accompanied by something else. Rage. Cold, clear, focused rage. They had stolen my peace, my confidence, my sense of self. They had made me doubt my own sanity while plotting to erase me completely, just as they had Elizabeth. I thought of the woman in the portrait, her sad eyes holding secrets I now understood. I thought of old Mr. Beaumont, spending his final years trying to atone for an unforgivable sin, and I made a vow to myself in the darkness. I would not share Elizabeth's fate. I would fight, and I would win. Morning arrived with a knock at my bedroom door. Not Samuel's usual discreet tap, but Nathaniel's confident rap. I quickly checked that the USB drive was secure in my pillowcase before calling. "Come in." Nathaniel entered, already dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, a cup of coffee in his hand. "Good morning, darling. How did you sleep?" "Wonderfully," I lied, forcing a smile. "Those pills really do help." "Excellent." He sat on the edge of the bed, studying me with what once might have passed for concern. Now I saw only assessment. "I have a proposition for you." "Oh?" I kept my tone light, curious. "Fiona and I have been discussing your situation. We think a change of scenery might do you good. There's a lovely wellness retreat in Switzerland. Very exclusive, very private. The perfect place to rest and recover." So they were accelerating their timeline. I felt a flutter of panic, but kept my expression neutral. "Switzerland sounds lovely," I said carefully. "When were you thinking?" "The day after tomorrow," he replied, watching me closely. "We've already made the arrangements. Dr. Winters agrees it's the best course of action. 2 days. I had 2 days to escape, to secure the evidence, to save myself." "That sounds perfect," I said, reaching for his hand. "You always know what's best for me." Relief washed over his features. He'd expected resistance. "Wonderful. I'll have Margot help you pack today. Light things, casual. The retreat is very relaxed." He leaned down to kiss my forehead. "I have, meetings in the city all day, but I'll be back for dinner. Fiona will keep you company. To monitor me, more likely." After he left, I lay back against the pillows, mind racing. I needed to act today, while Nathaniel was gone. But Fiona would be watching, and Margot, my personal assistant, reported everything directly to Nathaniel. I got up and prepared for the day, choosing a simple cashmere, sweater and slacks, the outfit of someone with no grand plans. When I went downstairs, Fiona was waiting in the breakfast room, scrolling through her phone. "Nathaniel tells me you've agreed to the retreat," she said without looking up. "Smart decision." "It sounds wonderful," I replied, pouring myself coffee. "Though I'll need to visit my bank today. I should have some spending money for the trip." Fiona's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "I'm sure Nathaniel has handled all that. Even so, I'd like to stop at the bank. And perhaps pick up a few things from Neiman's for the trip." I sipped my coffee casually. "Would you like to join me? We could have lunch at that little bistro you like." The invitation clearly surprised her. Fiona and I had maintained a cordial but distant relationship for years. She hesitated, suspicion warring with the opportunity to keep me under surveillance. "I suppose that would be nice," she finally said. "I'll have Thomas bring the car around at 11. "Perfect," I smiled. Step 1, accomplished. When Fiona excused herself to make a phone call, I quickly texted my old friend Caroline Reynolds, whom I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. Caroline had been my closest confidant during my curator days, before I'd gradually lost touch with her. A isolation I now recognized as deliberate on Nathaniel's part. "Need to see you urgently. Matter of life and death. Can you meet at Neiman's today at 1? Please don't tell anyone." Her response came almost immediately. "Of course. What's wrong? We'll explain in person. Thank you." Step 2, in motion. The morning passed in excruciating slowness. I pretended to sort through my closet with Margot, selecting items for my wellness retreat. All the while, I was acutely aware of the USB drive, now transferred to a locket around my neck, the one place I knew it would stay with me. At 11, Fiona and I departed in the sleek family Mercedes, Thomas driving us into the city. Our first stop was my bank, where I insisted on going inside alone. "Family banking privacy," I explained with a smile when Fiona attempted to accompany me. "You understand." She didn't like it, but causing a scene would have contradicted the narrative that everything was normal. Inside, I didn't withdraw the small amount I'd mentioned to Fiona. Instead, I accessed my safety deposit box, one Nathaniel didn't know about, opened with funds from my personal inheritance before I'd married him. Inside was a passport in my maiden name, emergency cash, and jewelry from my mother. I took everything, placing it in my handbag before withdrawing the modest sum I'd mentioned to Fiona from my regular account, the one I knew Nathaniel monitored. Next was Neiman Marcus, where I suggested Fiona and I shop separately to maximize our time. Let's meet at the restaurant at 1, I suggested. I'll make the reservation. Fiona agreed reluctantly, her eyes following me as I headed toward the women's department. As soon as she was out of sight, I texted Caroline, "Meet me in the third-floor restroom instead." 12:45. At precisely 12:45, I slipped into the luxurious restroom on the third floor. Caroline was already there, her familiar face creased with worry. "Evelyn, what on earth is going on? You look terrible." I burst into tears at the sight of her, the first real emotion I'd allowed myself to show in days. Between sobs, I gave her the condensed version. The drugging, the gaslighting, the planned institutionalization, the evidence on the USB drive. "My God," she whispered, horrified. "We need to get you out of there. Today. I can't just disappear," I explained, wiping my eyes. "They'll come after me. I need to secure the evidence first. Make sure it can't be buried." Caroline thought for a moment. "My brother's a lawyer. Criminal defense. He'll know what to do with the evidence, how to protect it. And you. Can you take me to him? Now?" She nodded. "Of course, but what about her?" She meant Fiona. I checked my watch. "I have about 10 minutes before she starts looking for me. Can you create a diversion? Something to keep her occupied while I slip out?" Caroline's eyes lit up with the same mischievous spark I remembered from our younger days. "Leave it to me. Meet me at the service entrance in 5 minutes." We parted ways, and I hurried through the store, taking a circuitous route to avoid running into Fiona. From my position near the perfume counter, I saw Caroline approach my sister-in-law with an enthusiastic greeting, pretending to be an old acquaintance, buying time for my escape. 5 minutes later, I was in Caroline's car, racing toward her brother's office in downtown Chicago. James Reynolds was nothing like I expected. Where Caroline was warm and artistic, her brother was coolly analytical, his office minimalist and intimidating. But his eyes were kind as he reviewed the contents of the USB drive. "This is extraordinary," he said finally, "and deeply disturbing. Mrs. Beaumont, you're right to be afraid. This is a sophisticated conspiracy to deprive you of your freedom and your assets. Can you help me?" "Absolutely. First, we need to secure this evidence properly." He made multiple copies of the files, storing them in his firm's secure server and on encrypted drives. "Second, we need to get you somewhere safe while we prepare legal action." "I can't just disappear," I repeated. "They'll destroy the evidence at the house. There are physical documents I haven't been able to secure yet." James considered this. "You're right. A strategic retreat is better than a panicked flight. Return home, but be extremely careful. Take nothing they give you. No food, no medication. We'll expedite the legal preparations and have everything ready within 48 hours. It wasn't ideal, but it was a plan. Caroline insisted on driving me back to Neiman's, where I would pretend I'd simply lost track of time in the dressing rooms. "I'll call you tomorrow," she promised, squeezing my hand. "Stay strong, Evelyn." As I watched her drive away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. That hope carried me through Fiona's irritation at my tardiness, through our tense lunch, and back to the mansion where I continued the charade of preparing for my wellness retreat. When Nathaniel returned that evening, I played the role of grateful, docile wife perfectly. Over dinner, I asked innocent questions about the retreat, pretending enthusiasm. "It sounds wonderful, darling. Thank you for arranging it." Nathaniel seemed pleased, relaxed even. He believed he'd won. "Just think. In 3 days, you'll be breathing the clean mountain air, focused only on getting better," he said, raising his wineglass in a toast. I smiled and raised my glass in return thinking. "In 3 days, you'll be facing criminal charges." That night, as I prepared for bed, Samuel slipped me another note with my evening tea. "The car will be ready at the gardener's cottage tomorrow night. 11 p.m. Bring only what you can carry." I burned the note in the fireplace, watching the flames consume the paper just as they would soon consume the life Nathaniel had built on lies. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. The following day moved with excruciating slowness. Every hour felt like a test of my acting abilities as I continued the charade of preparing for my wellness retreat. Margot hovered nearby, helping me pack a suitcase with light clothing and comfortable shoes, all perfectly appropriate for a Swiss sanatorium where I'd likely never be allowed to leave. Mrs. Beaumont? Margot's voice broke through my thoughts. Ms. Fiona asked if you'd join her for tea in the solarium at 3. Not a request. A summons. Of course, I replied with a practiced smile. Please tell her I'll be there. Alone again, I opened my jewelry box and selected pieces carefully. Not the flashiest or most obvious valuables, but those with the highest value to size. Ratio. Items I could easily conceal. Items I could sell if necessary. I also packed a small bag with essentials I would actually need. My passport, the emergency cash, a change of clothes, toiletries, and most importantly, a copy of the USB drive. This bag I hid in the back of my closet, ready for retrieval that night. At precisely 3 o'clock, I entered the solarium where Fiona waited. A picture of elegant poise in her Chanel suit, teacup balanced perfectly in manicured hands. Sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling, illuminating the tropical plants that filled the space. It had always been my favorite room in the mansion. Evelyn, thank you for joining me, Fiona said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. I thought we might have a little heart-to-heart before our departure. I sat, accepting the cup of tea she poured for me. That sounds lovely. I watched her carefully as she prepared my tea, adding a touch of honey and lemon, just as I liked it. But then, almost imperceptibly, she glanced around to ensure we were alone before reaching into her jacket pocket and adding something from a small vial. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral as she handed me the cup. You know, Evelyn, she began, watching me intently, I've always admired how you've handled yourself as Nathaniel's wife. It can't have been easy coming into a family with such strong traditions. I raised the cup to my lips but didn't drink, pretending to blow on the hot liquid. The Beaumonts have certainly been a force in my life. Indeed. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. And now, with these unfortunate episodes you've been experiencing, we only want what's best for you. I set the cup down, untouched. Of course. Although, I must admit, I'm curious about something. Oh? Her eyebrow arched delicately. Was it your idea or Nathaniel's? The drugging, I mean. The teacup in her hand trembled slightly, the only indication that my words had landed. Her recovery was impressive. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice glacial. Perhaps these paranoid delusions are exactly why you need specialized care. I leaned forward, keeping my voice conversational. You know what fascinates me, Fiona? How history repeats itself. Elizabeth Beaumont. Me. I wonder who's next. The color drained from her face. Who have you been talking to? Does it matter? The question is, what will Nathaniel do when he no longer needs you? When your usefulness expires? I stood, smoothing my skirt. Thank you for the tea. I think I'll rest before dinner. I left her sitting there, rigid with shock. The untouched teacup, a silent accusation between us. Back in my room, I paced nervously. I'd shown my hand, perhaps too soon. They would be watching me, even more closely now. Getting to the gardener's cottage at 11 would be nearly impossible. A soft knock at my door made me freeze. Mrs. Beaumont? Samuel's voice, barely audible. A package arrived for you. I opened the door cautiously. Samuel stood there, holding a small wrapped box. From Ms. Caroline, he said, his eyes conveying a silent message. Inside my room, I unwrapped the package, with trembling fingers. It contained a mobile phone, a burner, not traceable to me, and a note. James says, move up your timeline. Tonight. Call when safe. See, a chill ran down my spine. Had James discovered something urgent? Or had my confrontation with Fiona accelerated their plans? Either way, my window was closing. I had to leave tonight, as planned, no matter what obstacles they placed in my way. I spent the afternoon in my room, feigning a headache. Not difficult, given the tension headache actually forming behind my eyes. When Nathaniel came to check on me before dinner, I played the role of apologetic invalid. I'm so sorry, darling. I just need to rest. Perhaps some soup in my room later? He studied me for a moment, suspicion flickering briefly before his mask of concern returned. Of course, I'll have Samuel bring something up. After he left, I texted Caroline on the burner phone. Moving tonight as planned. We'll call when clear. Dinner arrived at 7. A bowl of soup delivered by Margot, not Samuel. I thanked her and set the tray aside as soon as she left, not trusting anything they prepared for me now. The hours crawled by. At 9, Nathaniel came to say goodnight, kissing my forehead with what felt like finality. Rest well, my dear. Tomorrow's a big day. His words sent ice through my veins. What had they planned for tomorrow? At 10:30, I changed into dark clothing, comfortable shoes, and a hooded coat. I retrieved my hidden bag and the small case of jewelry, leaving the larger suitcase packed with retreat clothing as a decoy. The mansion was quiet as I slipped from my room, taking the servants' stairs down to avoid the main staircase. The security system was sophisticated, but I knew the code. One of the few advantages of being the supposedly fragile wife no one thought to exclude from such information. I made it to the kitchen undetected and was about to exit through the garden door when I heard voices from the study. Nathaniel and Fiona, arguing in hushed but intense tones. She knows something, Fiona was saying. The way she spoke to me today? It doesn't matter, Nathaniel interrupted. By this time tomorrow, she'll be sedated and on a plane. Once she's at the clinic, she can think whatever she wants. No one will believe her. And if she's already taken precautions, if she's spoken to someone, who would she speak to? She has no friends left, no family nearby. We've made sure of that. I bit back a gasp. Hearing them discuss me so coldly, so calculatingly, was still shocking despite everything I now knew. What about that woman yesterday, at Neiman's? Fiona pressed. A coincidence, Nathaniel dismissed. You said yourself it was just someone who recognized her from charity events. I don't like coincidences, Fiona muttered. Well, I don't like loose ends, Nathaniel snapped. Which is why we're moving up the timeline. The doctor will be here at 7 tomorrow, not for a wellness check, but to administer the sedative for transport. By noon, she'll be on the plane. I'd been right to confront Fiona. They'd accelerated their plan, just as I'd accelerated mine. I slipped out the garden door into the cool night air, careful to close it silently behind me. The estate grounds were vast, with manicured lawns and formal gardens stretching for acres. The gardener's cottage lay at the farthest edge, hidden behind a stand of ancient oak trees. The journey felt endless as I crept through shadows, heart pounding each time a twig snapped or an owl called. Finally, the cottage came into view. A small, stone building, dark and seemingly abandoned. I used the key Samuel had given me, the door creaking slightly as it opened. Inside, it was basic, but clean. A single room with a bed, table, and small kitchenette. On the table was another note. Car keys under flower pot, blue Honda, North Service Road, GPS programmed, Godspeed. Samuel had thought of everything. I checked my watch, 10:50. I had 10 minutes to spare. I was about to step back outside when headlights swept across the window. A car was coming down the service road, not from the direction of the main house, but from the estate entrance. Panic seized me. Had they discovered my plan? Was this security coming to intercept me? I doused the small light I'd turned on and peered cautiously through the window. A sleek black Audi pulled up beside the cottage, its engine purring quietly in the night. The driver's door opened, and to my shock, Samuel emerged. I opened the cottage door. Samuel? What are you doing here? Change of plans, Mrs. Beaumont, he said urgently. They've called security to do an additional patrol tonight. The service road is being watched. My heart sank. Then I'm trapped. No, madam. I've brought the Audi instead of the Honda. Mr. Beaumont will assume I'm using it for my night off. We need to leave now, before they notice I'm gone. We? I echoed, surprised. I cannot in good conscience remain in their employment after tonight, he said simply. And you may need assistance? Tears pricked my eyes at this unexpected loyalty. Thank you, Samuel. We transferred my bags to the Audi and slipped away, through a rarely used back gate, avoiding the main security checkpoints. As the estate disappeared in the rearview mirror, a weight lifted from my chest, only to be replaced by a new anxiety. Where are we going? I asked. To meet your friend's brother, Samuel replied. Mr. Reynolds is expecting us at his lake house. It's remote, secure, and not connected to you in any way. The city lights faded as we drove north toward the Wisconsin border. I stared out at the darkness, contemplating the life I was leaving behind. 12 years of marriage, a position in society, a name that opened doors, and in exchange, my freedom, my sanity, my life. They'll come looking for me, I said quietly. Samuel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yes, madam, but by then, we'll be ready for them. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with dangers I couldn't yet see, But at least I was no longer alone in the beautiful prison my home had become. I was escaping, and soon I would be fighting back. James Reynolds's lake house was a modern structure of glass and cedar, perched on a bluff overlooking Lake Michigan. We arrived just after midnight, the full moon casting silver light across the water as James greeted us at the door. "Mrs. Beaumont," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "And this must be Samuel. Please, come in. You're safe here." The interior was minimalist but comfortable. Clean lines, neutral colors, and a wall of windows facing the lake. Caroline was already there, pacing anxiously in the open-concept living room. "Evelyn!" she cried, embracing me tightly. "Thank God you got out." "Just in time, it seems," I replied, explaining what I'd overheard between Nathaniel and Fiona. James listened intently, his expression growing grimmer. "They're moving faster than I anticipated. By now, they've likely discovered you're gone." As if on cue, the burner phone in my pocket buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Where are you?" N frantic. "Security searching grounds. Police not yet involved." Margot, I explained to the others. "My assistant. I'm surprised she's reaching out." "Can she be trusted?" James asked. I considered the question. Margot had always reported to Nathaniel, but there had been moments, concerned glances, small kindnesses, that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with her role. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but she could be useful." I typed a cautious response. "Safe. Why are you contacting me?" The reply came quickly. N saying you're confused, wandered off. F saying check hospitals. "I saw your packed bag missing. Different from suitcase. Knew you left deliberately." "She's observant," Samuel remarked, reading over my shoulder. "Why help me?" I texted back. "Because of Elizabeth came," the cryptic reply. "My grandmother was her nurse. She told me stories." My breath caught. Another connection to Elizabeth Beaumont. Another piece of the puzzle I hadn't known existed. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Location of original documents. N+F searching study. Library. Need to secure evidence before they destroy it." I looked up at James. "She's right. The physical documents, old Mr. Beaumont's letter, financial records, they're still in the house. If Nathaniel finds them, they'll disappear," James finished grimly. "And with them, a significant portion of your case. Can we trust this, Margot?" Caroline asked. "I don't think we have a choice," I replied. I texted Margot back with the location of the safe and its combination. "Now we wait," James said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "In the meantime, let's review what we have and build our case." Over coffee and sandwiches, the first real food I'd eaten in days, we spread the evidence across the dining table. Financial records, medical reports, audio recordings, and most damning of all, the detailed plan for my treatment in Switzerland. "The foundation of our case is strong," James explained, organizing documents into categories. Conspiracy to commit fraud, false imprisonment, forgery, gaslighting through administered substances. The criminal charges alone would put them away for years. "But," I prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice, "but they're wealthy, connected, and they've been crafting a narrative about your mental state for months. They'll claim everything was done out of concern for your well-being, that the documents are forgeries or misinterpretations." "They drugged me," I said flatly. "Surely we can prove that with blood tests?" "The substances Dr. Winters prescribed metabolize quickly. After months of ingestion, we might find trace evidence, but it's not a slam dunk." James tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "What we need is corroboration from someone on the inside." My phone buzzed again. "Found safe. Documents secured. Also found medical records in F's room. Detailed treatment plans. Meeting place." I showed James the message. "Looks like we might have our insider." We arranged to meet Margot the following afternoon at a roadside diner 50 miles from Chicago. Public enough to be safe, remote enough to avoid recognition. "I should go alone," I insisted when Caroline offered to accompany me. "Margot will be nervous enough without a crowd." "Absolutely not," James countered. "It could be a trap." In the end, we compromised. Samuel would drive me, while James and Caroline would arrive separately and sit at different tables, watching for any sign of trouble. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay awake in the guest bedroom, listening to the waves lapping against the shore below, my mind replaying every moment of the past months, searching for clues I'd missed, warning signs I'd ignored. Had Nathaniel ever loved me? Or had I simply been a convenient addition to his portfolio, cultured enough to enhance his image, wealthy enough in my own right to add to his coffers, compliant enough to be controlled. Morning brought the first tangible, response to my disappearance. A missing person report on the local news. Authorities are searching for Evelyn Ashford Beaumont, 42, who disappeared from her Lake Forest estate last night, the reporter announced over footage of police cars parked outside the mansion. Her husband, prominent businessman Nathaniel Beaumont, says his wife has been suffering from confusion and disorientation in recent months and may be in danger. Nathaniel appeared on screen, the picture of distressed concern in an impeccably tailored suit. "My wife's health has been declining," he said gravely. "She's been experiencing episodes of paranoia and confusion. We're desperate to find her and get her the help she needs." The camera cut to Fiona, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "We're so worried. If anyone has seen Evelyn, please contact the authorities immediately." I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat at their performance. "Well," Caroline said dryly, "at least they're predictable." "This complicates things," James mused. "Now law enforcement is involved. If they find you, they'll return you directly to Nathaniel's custody." "Then we need to move faster," I said. "We need to get Margot's evidence and take this public before they can spin it any further." The diner meeting was set for 2 p.m. We left in separate cars, taking circuitous routes to ensure we weren't followed. I arrived with Samuel at 1:45, choosing a booth with a clear view of the parking lot and both exits. At precisely 2 p.m., Margot entered, her usual polished appearance replaced by jeans, a baseball cap, and sunglasses. She slid into the booth across from me, removing her sunglasses only when she was certain of who I was. "Mrs. Beaumont," she whispered. "Thank God you're all right." "Thanks to Samuel," I replied, nodding toward him, standing vigilant near the counter. "And now it seems, thanks to you too." Margot glanced nervously around the diner before reaching into her bag and extracting a thick, manila envelope. "Everything I could find," she said, sliding it across the table. "Original documents from the safe, plus Dr. Winter's files detailing the medication he prescribed. Supposedly anti-anxiety medication, actually a cocktail of psychotropics designed to induce confusion and compliance." I opened the envelope enough to confirm its contents. Old Mr. Beaumont's original letter, financial records, and a typed medical protocol with my name at the top. "Why, Margot?" I asked quietly. "Why help me?" She looked down at her hands. "My grandmother worked at that Swiss clinic. She was Elizabeth Beaumont's nurse. She always believed Elizabeth was perfectly sane, that she'd been committed to silence her. When I took the position with your family, I had no idea." She trailed off, visibly distressed. "You had no idea you'd be participating in history repeating itself?" I finished for her. She nodded miserably. "When I realized what was happening, I didn't know what to do. I was afraid if I warned you directly, they'd just accelerate their plans. So I started leaving small clues. Forgetting to lock your bedroom door so you could move freely at night, misplacing some of your medication so you'd have clearer days." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you. You may have saved my life. There's more," she said, her voice dropping even lower. "The clinic. It's not just a mental health facility. Patients who are deemed uncooperative are moved to a more restricted setting. Elizabeth died there, Mrs. Beaumont. My grandmother always believed it wasn't natural causes." A chill ran through me. I'm saying Nathaniel and Fiona never intended for you to return," she finished, her eyes meeting mine directly for the first time. "And they're panicking now that you're gone." The implications were staggering. Not just imprisonment, not just theft of my assets, but something far darker. "What will you do now?" I asked her. "I gave my notice this morning. Family emergency." A grim smile touched her lips. "I doubt I'll be returning." "Come with us," I offered impulsively. "You're not safe there either." She shook her head. "I have arrangements, and this way I can still feed you information if needed." She slid a burner phone across the table. "My number's programmed in. Call if you need anything else." As she stood to leave, she hesitated. "Mrs. Beaumont, be careful. Nathaniel has resources you can't imagine. And Fiona, she's the dangerous one. She's been planning this for years." I watched her walk away, the envelope of evidence clutched tightly in my hands. When I was certain she'd gone safely, I signaled to Samuel, and we returned to the car where James was waiting. "Did you get it?" he asked, tensely. I patted the envelope. "Everything we need." "Good," he said grimly. "Because they've just escalated the search. There's now a medical alert attached to the missing person report, claiming you're a danger to yourself. Every law enforcement agency in 3 states is looking for you." The net was tightening, but for the first time, I had the means to fight back. Then it's time, I said decisively. Time to take this public. The lake house became our war room over the next 48 hours. James worked tirelessly, organizing the evidence into a comprehensive legal case, while simultaneously preparing for what we'd come to call Disclosure Day. Caroline leveraged her media contacts, arranging for coverage that couldn't be easily suppressed. Samuel provided invaluable insight into the Beaumont family's operations and vulnerabilities, and I prepared to tell my story. The timing has to be perfect, James explained as we gathered around the dining table on the morning of the third day. Too early, and they'll have time to counter with their confused wife narrative. Too late, and they might find us first. The weight of what we were about to do pressed on me. Once we went public, there would be no turning back. Are you sure about this? Caroline asked gently. Once it's out there, your private life becomes public property. Everything will be scrutinized. I'm sure, I replied, my voice stronger than I expected. They tried to erase me, to make me disappear. I won't let them bury the truth like they did with Elizabeth. James nodded approvingly. Then let's proceed. The press conference is set for noon at the Chicago Bar Association. Security is in place. The evidence has been duplicated and secured in multiple locations. And Nathaniel? I asked. Still searching frantically, Samuel confirmed, checking his phone. Margot reports he's barely sleeping, making increasingly erratic decisions. The police are growing skeptical of his story. Apparently, your friends have been calling in, saying his claims about your mental state don't match their experiences with you. That surprised me. I'd thought myself isolated, cut off from my former social circle. Perhaps Nathaniel's control hadn't been as complete as he believed. What about Fiona? I pressed. Samuel's expression darkened. She's been making phone calls to Switzerland, urgent ones. Cleaning up loose ends, no doubt. Ensuring the clinic was prepared with plausible deniability if questioned. It's time to get ready, Caroline announced, checking her watch. The car will be here in an hour. I retreated to the guest room where I'd laid out my chosen outfit, not the demure, expensive clothing of Nathaniel's perfect wife, but a sharply tailored navy suit I'd borrowed from Caroline. Professional, authoritative, the outfit of a woman in control of her story. As I dressed, I caught sight of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The fear that had haunted my eyes for months was gone, replaced by a steely determination. I looked powerful. The journey into Chicago passed in tense silence. James reviewed last-minute details while I mentally rehearsed what I would say. Not a script. We'd decided authenticity was crucial, but key points I needed to cover. The Chicago Bar Association building loomed ahead, its limestone facade gleaming in the midday sun. A small crowd of reporters had already gathered at the entrance, alerted by Caroline's strategic leaks about a major revelation concerning one of Chicago's most prominent families. James turned to me as the car slowed. Remember, once we enter that building, everything changes. Are you absolutely certain? I thought of Elizabeth, trapped in that Swiss clinic, her truth buried with her. I thought of the careful, calculated way Nathaniel and Fiona had stripped away my confidence, my sense of self. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The next hour unfolded like a dream. James led me through a side entrance to avoid premature exposure to the press. In a small conference room, final preparations were made. Microphones tested, security positioned, legal advisors briefed. At precisely noon, we entered the main conference room where journalists from every major outlet in Chicago waited, cameras poised. The buzz of conversation died as I took my seat at the center of the long table, James on one side, Caroline on the other. James spoke first, his voice calm and authoritative. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. My name is James Reynolds, attorney for Mrs. Evelyn Ashford Beaumont. Mrs. Beaumont has been reported missing by her husband. As you can see, she is not missing, but rather has removed herself from a dangerous situation. She is here today to share her story and present evidence of a disturbing conspiracy against her. He nodded to me, and I leaned toward the microphone, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. My name is Evelyn Ashford Beaumont, I began, my voice clear and strong. 3 days ago, I fled my home to escape what I discovered was a coordinated plan to have me declared mentally incompetent, institutionalized in Switzerland, and permanently separated from my rightful assets and position as co-trustee of the Ashford Beaumont Foundation. A ripple of shock moved through the room as I continued, methodically laying out the evidence. The drugging, the gaslighting, the forged medical reports, the planned treatment at the Swiss facility. This was not a sudden decision by my husband out of concern for my well-being, I explained. Documents we've uncovered show this plan has been in development for over 3 years, accelerating as we approached my 15th wedding anniversary. The date when, according to my late father-in-law's original trust documents, I would gain equal control over all Ashford Beaumont assets. James distributed press packets containing redacted copies of key documents, allowing time for the journalists to review them. But this story goes beyond financial motivation, I continued when the room quieted again. It represents a pattern of behavior in the Beaumont family. 40 years ago, Nathaniel's mother, Elizabeth Beaumont, was committed to the same Swiss facility under similar circumstances. She never returned. New evidence suggests her death may not have been from natural causes, as reported. The room erupted in questions. James fielded them professionally, directing specific inquiries to the appropriate sections of the evidence packets. I remained composed, answering honestly when asked about my emotional state, my fears, my reasons for coming forward. I am not doing this for vengeance, I stated firmly when a reporter asked about my motivations. I am doing this for justice, for myself and for Elizabeth, and to ensure this pattern stops with me. As the press conference continued, an aide slipped James a note. His expression remained neutral as he read it, but I saw the slight tightening around his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I've just been informed that the Chicago Police Department has arrived at the Ashford Beaumont estate with warrants related to the evidence we've presented today. Mr. Beaumont and his sister are currently being taken in for questioning." A fresh wave of excitement swept through the room. Cameras flashed more intensely. Questions came more rapidly. Through it all, I maintained my composure, answering clearly and directly. When asked how I felt about my husband's potential arrest, I answered truthfully. I feel sorrow that our relationship ended this way. I loved Nathaniel once, but I cannot feel sympathy for someone who was willing to drug me, gaslight me, and ultimately imprison me for financial gain. After nearly 2 hours, James called an end to the press conference. As we prepared to leave, a familiar face appeared at the back of the room. Margot, her expression a mixture of anxiety and relief. She approached quickly as the journalists filed out. "They've arrested them both," she confirmed in a low voice. "Dr. Winters, too. But there's something else you should know." She handed me a slim folder. Inside was a death certificate for Elizabeth Beaumont, along with a handwritten statement from Margot's grandmother, notarized shortly before her own death. I scanned it quickly, my blood running cold at the details. Elizabeth hadn't died of natural causes or suicide as officially reported. According to the nurse's statement, she had been found with lethal levels of sedatives in her system after threatening to expose her husband's financial crimes. "She never got to tell her story," Margot said quietly. "You're telling it for her now." As we left the building through a private exit, the afternoon sun felt different on my skin. Warmer, more vivid. For the first time in months, I was breathing freely, standing in my truth. The next weeks would bring challenges, legal battles, public scrutiny, the painful dismantling of a life I'd thought was real. But in that moment, stepping into the sunlight with my head held high, I knew I had already won the most important victory. I had reclaimed myself. 6 months passed like a whirlwind of depositions, court appearances, and media coverage. The case against Nathaniel, Fiona, and their accomplices grew stronger as more evidence emerged. Former staff came forward with corroborating statements. Financial audits revealed extensive fraud beyond what we'd initially uncovered. Dr. Winters, facing the loss of his medical license and criminal charges, eventually agreed to testify against the siblings in exchange for a reduced sentence. Through it all, I remained steadfast, telling my story clearly and consistently despite the defense team's attempts to undermine my credibility. Each time they suggested I was confused or misinterpreting events, I produced another piece of evidence, another witness. Another irrefutable fact. Today marked the end of that chapter. I stood on the steps of the courthouse, the autumn sun warm on my face as James addressed the gathered press. The plea agreement announced today represents an acknowledgement of guilt by all parties involved, he stated. Nathaniel and Fiona Beaumont have pleaded guilty to conspiracy, fraud, and attempted unlawful imprisonment. As part of the agreement, they will serve prison terms, make financial restitution, and permanently relinquish all control of the Ashford Beaumont Foundation. I listened, feeling strangely detached from the proceedings. The legal victory, while important, wasn't what had healed me. That had come from within, from reclaiming my voice, my autonomy, my sense of self. Mrs. Beaumont. A reporter called out, "What will you do now?" I stepped forward, no longer intimidated by the cameras and microphones. First, I'll be establishing a special fund within the foundation called the Velvet Reclaim, dedicated to supporting women who have been silenced, manipulated, or erased. Second, I'll be working with legislators to strengthen guardianship laws and oversight of private mental health facilities. And personally, another journalist pressed. I smiled genuinely. Personally, I'm reclaiming my life, day by day, piece by piece. After the press conference, I declined the celebratory dinner James and Caroline had planned. Instead, I asked Samuel to drive me to Lake Forest Cemetery, where Elizabeth Beaumont was buried. Her grave was simple despite the family's wealth. A modest headstone with just her name, dates, and the inscription, "Beloved Mother." I placed a bouquet of white roses against the cool marble. "We did it, Elizabeth," I said softly. "They can't silence us anymore." The evening breeze rustled through the oak trees overhead, a gentle acknowledgement of shared triumph across time. Samuel waited respectfully by the car, his posture still formal despite our months of shared struggle. He had become more than an employee, a trusted ally, a friend. "Where to now, Mrs. Beaumont?" he asked as I returned to the car. I considered the question. The mansion had been sold as part of the settlement, my personal belongings moved to a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. But tonight neither place felt right. The lake house, I think, I decided. One last night there before it goes back to James. The drive north was peaceful, the sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks over the water. I'd grown to love the lake house during our weeks of preparation and planning. Its clean lines and open spaces represented the new beginning I'd forged for myself. Caroline had left a note on the kitchen counter, along with a bottle of champagne. For new beginnings. Couldn't be prouder of you. Call me tomorrow. C. I smiled, pouring a single glass and taking it out to the deck overlooking the lake. The full moon cast a silver path across the dark water, a natural spotlight on the journey ahead. Samuel joined me after ensuring the house was secure. "Will you be all right here alone, Mrs. Beaumont? I can stay if you prefer." "I'll be fine, Samuel. And please, after everything we've been through, I think you can call me Evelyn." He smiled slightly, the most expression I'd seen from him in our years of acquaintance. "Very well. Evelyn, what will you do tomorrow?" I considered the question, sipping my champagne. "Begin again. My art career has been on hold for 12 years. It's time to return to what I love. The foundation will keep you busy as well," he noted. "Yes, but differently now. No more society galas where I'm just an ornament on Nathaniel's arm. The Velvet Reclaim will have real purpose, real impact." Samuel nodded approvingly. "Mr. Beaumont Sr. would be proud. He always said you were the best thing that happened to the family." He was a complicated man, I reflected, guilty of terrible things in his past, but trying to make amends in his way. "As we all must with the time we're given," Samuel replied philosophically. After he left, I remained on the deck, watching the moon's reflection ripple across the lake. The past 6 months had transformed me in ways I was still discovering. I was stronger, certainly, more discerning, less willing to silence my own instincts for the sake of appearances. But I was also more compassionate, understanding how easily anyone could be manipulated when vulnerabilities were expertly exploited. I thought of the women the Velvet Reclaim would help, women like me, like Elizabeth, who had been gaslighted, diminished, erased. My phone buzzed with a text from Caroline. "CNN wants an extended interview. Exclusive. Your story in your words. Think about it." I smiled, setting the phone aside. There would be time for more interviews, more advocacy. But tonight was for me alone, a quiet celebration of reclaimed freedom. Inside the house, I found a leather-bound journal Caroline had left as a gift weeks ago. I'd been too busy with legal proceedings to use it. Now I opened it to the first blank page and began to write. For years, I thought I was being too emotional, too dramatic, too much. But I was just being dismissed by people who feared what I would become if I ever woke up. Today, I am fully awake. Today, I reclaim not just my name, my position, or my assets, but something far more precious. My voice, my truth, my power to define myself. Today marks the beginning of the rest of my life, a life I choose, a life I shape, a life that is authentically mine. Elizabeth, this is for you too. Your story didn't end with your death. It continues through me, through every woman who refuses to be silenced. They thought I was just an ornament in this family, but I was the foundation. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of completion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new beginnings. But tonight, in this peaceful moment between what was and what would be, I had everything I needed. The lake house creaked gently in the night breeze, a comforting sound that reminded me I was safe, I was free, I was home, not in a physical place, but in myself. I raised my glass in a final toast to Elizabeth, to Samuel, to Caroline and James, to Margot, and most importantly, to myself, to the velvet reclaim. I whispered to the moonlight, to taking, back what was always rightfully mine. Outside, the lake lapped gently against the shore, a rhythmic affirmation that echoed my newfound truth. Power isn't in the title you hold. It's in what you survive with your dignity intact. And my dignity was not just intact, but strengthened, burnished by fire into something unbreakable. I was Evelyn Ashford, no longer defined by Beaumont, and my story was just beginning.